I'm so happy to be joined by Al Bickham. He's the communications manager at Creative Assembly.
Lovely to see you.
Good to see you. This is a game I'm very excited for, and it's been 9 years since
the original Rome.
Rome Total War.
Yeah.
Obviously, you guys have made a lot of games in the interim. Technology has advanced in the interim.
Yeah, lots.
I mean,
lots.
if you were to kind of hit those high points of the changes that have happened from the first Rome to this one, what would they be?
Well, it's hard to put a finger on like one or two things, but it's really, the whole thing has been a process of gradual evolution. So you can't really compare Rome 2 to the original Rome, apart from the setting, and the fact that we're dealing with the Romans and Carthaginians and the barbarians and those different kind of cultures. But so much has changed in the intervening time, and we've learned a lot about how to make a more subtle and intricate campaign game, a game of statecraft, the turn-based part of the game. That's advanced so enormously that it doesn't bear an awful lot of resemblance to the original. Diplomacy has changed so much. We're introducing politics into Rome 2 as well, which is a new feature, and battle as well. The kind of level of detail we have in battles is just so, we can do so much more now.
Now, for those that don't know, sort of the Creative Assembly games, it really is, you've carved out a very unique space in the strategy genre.
Yeah, I think so.
Where it's both turn-based and it's real-time, and you always play within a historical setting.
That's right, yeah.
I mean, what's kind of the philosophy of a Total War game?
So, it's really about, whenever we come to make a new Total War game, we go, let's find a period in history which has all the right ingredients for the Total War DNA, if you like, right? So what you have is a period in history where there are a large number of factions, in a state of uneasy alliance or even outright war, all vying for supremacy, any one of which actually, if it had made the right decisions, could have risen to the top and become, the leading faction in its country or its geographic area or its continent or its world or whatever, So it's really about, choosing those periods. So going back to Rome's wonderful, obviously, because it's such a fascinating period, and it's a kind of easy cultural reference point for everybody, because everybody knows something about Rome. You look at you show someone a picture of a Roman centurion, and you're like, "What's that?" And they're like, "It's a Roman centurion."
It still exists in the popular imagination.
Exactly,
quite
exactly. Yeah. And with the whole kind of Total War thing, it's really about a game of two halves. It's a turn-based game based on a big map somewhere in the world. In Rome 2, it's obviously the ancient world, and it's a game of statecraft and diplomacy and economic management and population management and army management, and really gearing yourself to build and improve your armies so you can go and conquer other factions on the map. So, and of course, when you come to have those battles, you dive into real-time battles where you're controlling thousands of troops in the most epic RTS environments you can find. So that's really what building a Total War game is about. It's about creating, as you say, this unique blend of turn-based and real-time that nobody else really does. So.
And the Total War games, it's interesting because there is a sense of historical realism, but because of how you're playing it, you're kind of upending, or you have the ability to upend how things really played out. In the case of Rome, where in Roman history do you start, and sort of how close to the barbarians at the gate can you get in the history of the Empire?
So like any Total War game, we start you in a kind of historically accurate point in history. In the case of Rome 2, the grand campaign begins in 272 BC, which is the time when Rome was at loggerheads with Carthage. Really, it was, what enabled Rome to become the great empire that it became was the Punic Wars and conquering Carthage and owning trade in the Mediterranean, owning that wealth and being able to expand and expand its armies and expand, throughout the world. But what we're also doing with Rome 2, we've got a kind of small contained narrative mini campaign right at the start called the prologue, which is set during the Samnite Wars, which is before 272 BC, and it's really about Rome's struggle to become the dominant faction within Italy itself on the Italian peninsula. So that's where you really you can start the game by playing the prologue, and it's a kind of easy in. It kind of demystifies all the campaign game systems, and it holds you by the hand and lets you understand how the Total War systems work.
Because it is a very complex system. I mean, it's
it's a big game, yeah.
So if memory serves me right, if it's 272 BC, we are still actually in the proper republic.
That's right,
Rome, prior to the rise of Julius Caesar and Augustus, where it really was an empire that kind of had shades of democracy surrounding it. How do you incorporate such a monumental historical transition sort of within the game, where the player obviously can be making a lot of decisions himself?
Sure thing, yeah. So, I mean, as you advance, as you expand, your empire will change. You'll hit that point where you, for example, you get your kind of Marian reforms, and then suddenly your armies are different. They're more organised. They have different equipment, So you kind of hit these points as you go along, and particularly if you're playing as Rome, because we have a politics system in place now as well, and it's you play as a great house in Rome. If you choose to play as the Roman faction, you play as one of the great houses, the Julia, or the Cornelia. And these guys obviously vying for supremacy within Rome. Now, the way you deal with the other families, of course, dictates whether you become that dominant faction, whether you have complete control. At the start of the game, you are the dominant faction, you're the ruling faction, as it were, but they have their own agendas, so you'll have to deal with those. And whether that leads to you trying to maintain the status quo and keep a kind of republic-style situation in place, or whether you make that Caesar-style grab for power and, look to throw your proconsul's chair out of the Senate House and just sit there yourself and become emperor. That's up to you. If you do that, you are almost guaranteed to find yourself in a triumvirate civil war situation. So it's the while you won't follow, it's almost guaranteed you won't follow exactly the course of history, because your game will take you in interesting directions, and factions will grow in their own way and treat you in a different way through diplomacy. You can still aim to play for as much historical accuracy as you want. So, but like any Total War game, as soon as we put the game in the player hands, the thread, the timeline of history tends to become counterfactual. So.
Let's talk about the politics, because I am very excited. I mean, anyone who's read the Robert Graves or anything about Rome, you never turned your back on anybody during your period of time in that city.
Exactly.
How have you kind of brought forth that wonderful drama into the game, and how many choices does it offer the player?
So in a couple of ways, really. Every house that's represented, every house within Rome which is represented in the politics screen is, consists of a kind of house leader, the main general, which is really you in this case as the player, and all the generals that you've put in place beneath that guy. So you're effectively your house leaders. They all contribute certain statistics, gravitas and ambition, actually in this case, and this builds up a kind of political capital, right, which you can expend on certain actions with the other families. You can attempt to marry family members off to balance power between the houses, for example. You can look to, assassinate. You can look to discredit. You can do all this kind of interesting, intriguing stuff. And to kind of bring further colour to that, we have subjects, we just call them subjects, but they're kind of characters of interest who appear over time in your empire, and they'll pop up, and it'll be like, oh, a famous gladiator has risen to a position of public prominence. The people love him. What are you going to do about that? I mean, here's a kind of handy guide to have in your pocket. Yeah. Because if it's like, I'm chums with my famous gladiator friend here.
Well, there was an example, and I found this quite intriguing. Last time I saw the game, where Cicero was railing against you as the player.
That's
and
right.
You have the decision. Okay, maybe I'm just going to associate him. Yeah. But just making that decision does not mean it's going to happen. And we actually failed in the assassination, which
There's a possibility of failure. Yeah. So you could attempt.
What's the system that's working underneath that?
So, there's a number of factors that go into it. I mean, there's certain, you've got your political capital expenditure, for example. How much you're gonna do. It'll cost you more to do certain things than other things. There is a slight random element to it as well, of course. But really, it's about your ratings, about your stats, and about how likely you are to do that. So, and of course, failure brings with it a whole new set of problems. And we have these sort of linked dilemmas throughout the game as well. So, you know, when you're presented with, you know, with a kind of, you know, one of these choices is slightly better than the other one, but they both, you know, have some kind of possible negative attached to it. What you choose and the outcome of that can trigger further dilemmas further down the line, which are related. So you kind of get this thread of dilemmas appearing over time that are triggered by the previous one. So, you know, no two games are going to be the same, you know.
And as you pointed out, you have the option to choose the Romans, but you can play other parts of the ancient world as
Of course,
well.
yeah. So you can play as the Carthaginians, for example. You know, equally kind of large and you know, at the time they were a great trading empire. So you can play. I think, you know, we have like 9 different factions at the start of the game. So you've got your kind of, they're sort of split into 3 different cultural types, which all look and feel very different. They all start in very different parts of the world with different terrain. And, you know, different technologies as well, so that they can develop. So you've got your barbarian culture guys, I think the playable tribes that you can start with, the Iceni, who are the Brits, you know, Boudica and all that. And you've got the Arverni, which I think was Vercingetorix's tribe, and the Suebi, who are the Germanic tribe there. And then you've got your kind of Greco-Roman cultures. So you've got the Romans, of course, and Carthage itself, and the Ptolemaic Egyptians, who, you know, after Alexander, you know, the Ptolemies basically went down and took Alexandria.
It became rather Roman in its
yeah, well, it's very Greek, you know, and that was kind of reflected in the way the gods changed in Alexandria as well. You know, they had Zeus Amun, for example, you know, who was literally a blend of, you know, smashing a Greek god into an Egyptian god, and you're like, ta-da, there you go. You know, keep the people happy because they've still got their gods, and we bring ours as well. So, and then you've got the kind of Eastern kingdoms as well. So you've got Parthia and Pontus. So yeah, again, very different. And wherever you are in the world, you know, it doesn't, you know, whichever faction you play as, you can go and taste some of that different flavour. You know, you can go send your forces campaigning off. You know, you're playing as the Germanic barbarian Suebi tribe, you know, big swordsmen and, you know, spearmen flying out of the forests. But, you know, if you work your way over to the Eastern kingdoms, you can be hiring camel riders and African war elephants and whatever, you know, it's to bolster your forces, because wherever you are, you can hire mercenaries. So
I was going to ask you, because that is one of the, it never ceases to be fun as long as you have the elephants. But sort of the introduction of these wonderful war units that obviously were so connected with Carthage. How do you sort of introduce something as burly as an elephant and not upset the balance of the game?
They're really expensive and they're quite risky. So, you know, when elephants get angry, it's like, we're just going to get out of the way now, you know, because if they run amok, so certain things are more likely to trigger them running amok. So hitting with fire arrows, for example, you know, is going to spook elephants, right?
And they don't really have fidelity to the people that own the elephant.
Exactly, yeah.
They're just going to take out anybody who's
Precisely, they're just surrounded by little guys with pointy things, right? And they're just going to trample whoever comes near them. So, but you can always, you know, if things are going really, really south and you've lost control of your elephants and they're trampling all over your army, you can kill your own elephants. You know, you can do that, and it's like terrible loss because that's a really expensive unit, you know, and that's a big investment for an army. So. You know, used right, they can be really effective, but you know, they can come with a price as well. So, you know, not just a monetary one.
So when you're playing in the real-time aspect of the game, how close is that in terms of just numbers of soldiers on the ground to what people believe was actually happening with the Roman armies?
So I think it's reasonably accurate. You know, within the constraints of what you can do in a video game, of course. But you know, if you have 20,000 troops in a battle, you know, like 10,000 on each side, that's pretty reasonable. I mean, you know, Teutoburg Forest, I think, you know, the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, there were 3 legions of Roman soldiers there. They estimate that to be, you know, well, different histories give different estimates, but that, you know, a lot of it says it's around 15,000 men, you know, and that's
a lot.
It's a lot. And you can have that in a total war battle, you know, easily have that in a total war battle, you know. You throw in, you know, you can make those battles as big or small as you like, you know. So we've got, this combined naval and land system as well now. So you disembark your troops off the. You played a little bit of this with the Battle of the Nile previously, but it's a combination of naval supporting the land battles. With ranged attacks, but also with disembarking troops. You can have full kind of amphibious assault battles. And you'll have a few of those because there's a lot of port cities in the ancient world. Trade was all about those ports. So. Yeah, you can have pretty big battles with lots of men. Yeah, just like they did in history.
So my final question: Creative Assembly in the ensuing years since the first Rome game.
Yeah.
We've seen Empire, we've seen Napoleon, we've seen the Return to Shogun.
Yeah.
All of these games, it's not like you can take the form of one and put it on the next. Because all these wars and these time periods, war was conducted so differently.
Of course.
How are you guys able to do that? I mean, this game on its own is massive, and if you told me it took you 6 years of work, it wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Yeah. Somehow we've managed to do it in 2.5.
Yeah.
And then we've got a big team now. We've got about 100. I think it's around 120 people on the development team alone. Not counting support staff like the IT staff and operations. But the process is really. What's the next game we're going to do? Okay, we need to change things for that. So we have to scope out what those changes are going to be. Some Total War games are more about ranged combat than others. So we've got compare Shogun 2 to Fall of the Samurai. You've got medieval, beautiful, simple, crystal clear medieval Japanese spear, bow, sword. Cavalry infantry. Bang, lovely, beautiful, simple, Zen-like mechanics of battle, right? You take it forward 300 years to the Boshin War, and people are throwing artillery shells around. They've got Gatling guns, and everybody's got a damn rifle. So there's a lot of changes we have to make to that, but some core principles remain the same. So with ranged combat, for example, we work on literally a physical model. So every projectile that is fired by every weapon in the game, be that bow, rifle, Gatling gun, whatever, it's literally only able to hit the troops that the bullet can pass through. So if there's a wall there, and there's a guy standing there and a guy standing there, it can't hit that guy, it'll bounce off the wall. If the bullet goes there, it will hit that guy, and that guy will go down. So, we don't play a numbers game as in, this gun is going to do this many, this many casualties to this unit, there the equation's done. If you can't see them, you can't hit them. And if they're in cover, you'll have a much reduced chance of hitting them. So certain kind of battle mechanics, things like the projectile system, carry on from game to game, and they evolve with every title as well. We find better ways of doing stuff, or different ways of doing stuff because it's relevant to that era, So what I can say is it takes a lot of work.
Well, it is
as you might imagine.
Definitely on display. The game is coming out early in September?
September 3rd, yes.
September 3rd. I cannot wait to play. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, my pleasure.